Welcome back, everybody. In this section, we're going to talk about the types of metamorphism and the types of metamorphic environments. Now, this diagram that I have here is not perfect. In fact, none of the diagrams that I have in this particular section are going to fully capture everything that I'm talking about. This is why it is so important to understand the concepts behind what I'm talking about with metamorphism, instead of simply looking at one of these diagrams and memorizing what's on it and thinking that that means you understand the section. Now, let's go ahead and get started. So first, the four types of metamorphism we are going to talk about: contact, regional, burial, and shock. So if we look at it on this diagram here, contact metamorphism, where some kind of a hot body interacts with the surrounding rock. We have regional metamorphism over here. We have extensive mountain building, and underneath the mountain is the regional metamorphism. We have burial metamorphism, which happens in a little bit more of a shallow setting as sediments pile up. And finally, shock metamorphism, which happens as a result of some kind of an impact, usually a meteorite. So here is another diagram showing something very similar, right? We have our subducting plate, we have our continent, and then underneath, where we have this zone of melting and magma generation, this is where we get our first type, contact metamorphism. So what exactly does this mean? What is contact metamorphism? So you imagine we take a rock, we inject hot magma into the rock, and everything that the magma touches is going to get burned. The stuff that's closer to the magma gets extra crispy. The stuff that's a little further away maybe gets a little bit burned. And if you're too far away, then you don't get burned at all. There's no alteration. And this sort of burning process from a hot magma or hot fluid is called contact metamorphism. Metamorphism occurs when rock is heated and chemically changed adjacent to an intruded body of hot magma. This tends to be small in scale. We're not talking about an entire region or mountain range. We're talking about something that is a little bit more local. And when we talked about it burning the area around it, that area that gets burned is called the aureole. It's like the aura around the rock. So we have our boring old regular country rock here. The original rock hasn't been altered, sitting there doing its thing. We have the intruder, the granitic magma, and then everything in between the two is the aureole. Got slightly cooked stuff here on the outside, a marble in this case, because we are altering limestone. And as it gets closer to the magma, it gets altered a little bit more, cooked a little bit more. It becomes calcite, the thing that's in limestone, with chlorite and serpentinite. Gives it this green color. Finally, when you get right next to the magma, you get garnet and pyroxenes, indicating a higher degree of metamorphism. This is what contact metamorphism looks like in more detail. So you might remember this picture from the section on igneous rocks. If not, you might want to go back and watch that one again. So we have our volcano, and we have this whole magma plumbing system, including all of these little offshoots, little lava tubes. One of them, in particular called a dike, cuts across existing sedimentary layers or structures. And this is actually something that is seen here in the Grand Canyon. So we have our existing layers of sedimentary rock, just like these layers over here, and we have it cut by some kind of intruding lava tube, intruding hot magma. And as a result, everything around the tube gets altered into this sort of purpley stuff. Well, because it's a quartz sandstone, what we wind up with is a lot of this stuff, quartzite. Our next type is regional metamorphism, and what is this? So you imagine you take a whole region, a bigger piece than you did with contact metamorphism. Take all of Phoenix, you bury it under a huge mountain range. There's tons of pressure and heat because it's buried under so much rock. We get large-scale cooking of an extensive area of the crust. Typically, this is going to be associated with plate tectonics. Why? Because plate tectonics is the way that you build these mountains, a process that is called orogenesis. So back to this diagram, which we've seen before. Here is contact metamorphism, but here, underneath the mountain range as it's building, this is where we get our regional metamorphism. Going to be much more extensive in terms of the total area altered. So what does regional metamorphism look like? So here, in the core of the Grand Tetons, this is one of the mountain ranges in the northern part of the Rockies. We can see rocks that are a result of regional metamorphism. We can also see this in the western Sierra Nevadas, and you might be able to recognize the kind of rock that you're looking at here. It's going to be one type over here, maybe one type of rock over here, things that we've discussed in this section. What are we looking at? Well, this is going to be migmatite on the left and gneiss over here on the right, something that looks a little bit more like this. So our next type is called burial metamorphism. What do we imagine here? We imagine we have a big hole in the ground. You start filling it with sediment, more and more piling up. And as you do this, the bottom of the pile starts to experience increased amounts of heat and pressure. Eventually, the pile gets so big to where the stuff at the bottom starts cooking, and this is the process of burial metamorphism. And usually this is going to happen in something that's called a basin setting. A basin being kind of a big hole in an entire region of the Earth, a big bowl on Earth's surface. So then here is maybe where a bowl was before, and slowly here right off the coast of the continent is slowly filling with sediments to where the ones at the bottom get hot enough to start to cook. We have burial metamorphism. And one very famous example of burial metamorphism, this is what created the so-called yellow stripe on Mount Everest. We have this limestone and marble, which is very, very close to the top. This is a result of the burial metamorphic process. There was some limestone put into a sediment basin. Slowly, more sediments are piled on top of it until the stuff at the bottom becomes marble. Right? We're looking at this yellow stripe here, which you can see on Everest and some of the other mountains in the area. If you look up close, this yellow stuff is actually a marble. And these, something you might have seen before, the famous four peaks of Arizona, seen on the license plates here, these are metamorphosed sedimentary rocks, specifically quartzite, which occur as a result of the burial metamorphic process. So our final case is shock metamorphism. And what does this look like? Well, first you take a rock and then you wait for the final number in the access code, which is 3. The final digit is 3, last digit is 3. Actually, you take it and you wait until it is hit by a meteorite. Could be some time for this to happen. And as a result of the impact, sudden high pressure, otherwise known as shock, you have changes in the structure of all the minerals in that rock. And one very famous example of this is Barringer Crater in Arizona, otherwise known as Meteor Crater, pretty close to the Flagstaff area. And as a result of this massive impact, you have medium to high temperatures and really, really high pressures in combination. You can actually see certain minerals called coesite and stishovite. These are different forms of quartz, of silica, but with a slightly different crystal form. You can find these here, and well, even if you didn't see this big thing that looks like a crater, if you saw coesite and you saw stishovite, you know when these minerals form, you could tell that there had been some kind of impact which caused the shock metamorphism. Okay, well, take a moment to congratulate yourself for having made it through everything on this page here, all the way through the rock cycle, everything from weathering and erosion to sedimentary rocks to igneous rocks to now metamorphic rocks. We have covered it all. Congratulations. So what are the big ideas for our unit? Well, first, what is metamorphism and what does it mean to have a different grade of metamorphism? What are the 4 types of metamorphic textures? What does foliation mean? How do veins form? You'll need to know what protolith means and what are the protoliths, the parent rocks, for different types of metamorphic rocks. If I give you a metamorphic rock like a marble, could you tell me what the original rock was? And then finally, what are the different types of metamorphism and what are some examples of metamorphism as seen in Arizona? That is all I have for getting to the end of this video. Thank you.